Well, good afternoon and good morning, APM fans. We welcome you and we thank you for joining our 2020 Q2 All Hands, Heads, and Hearts event. This is a live event and it is open to the public. We've done this now for 2 events in a row. First quarter, we actually did it over a Facebook Live video. This quarter, we're doing it over our new Microsoft Teams platform. So we hope that the event today is smooth sailing, but please do give us any feedback or ideas that you may have for ways that we can improve the event, either in terms of content or the platform, or really just anything that we could do to increase the value of this event for all of you. This is a celebratory event. This is our opportunity to celebrate our business's success. And what that really means is that we want to celebrate you because each and every one of you are so important and so special to helping us meet our mission and our vision and to bring success to APM overall. So some of the ways that we want to do that today is just by bringing to light some of the wonderful things that you've done in the past 3 to 6 months, and then transitioning and focusing on what some of the things are that you may look forward to across APM in the next 3 to 6 months. So as far as formatting for the event today, we are going to do about a 30-minute business update segment wherein Jake and his chief leadership staff are going to talk about the APM vision, mission, strategy, and the priorities that we have for the immediate future. Then we're going to transition into about a 30-minute Q&A portion. And when we get to that point, I will prompt you all with information for how to input your questions. We also had a few questions come in over the digital form that we put out in advance. And so I say thank you to those individuals who took the time to put their questions in advance. We will actually hold a random drawing for those who took the time to put their questions in early, and we'll have a giveaway for a special someone based on that drawing. One last note before we get started here, the entire event is being recorded, so we will make this available after the event on our APM YouTube channel. Look for that link coming this Friday to our social media channels, as well as if you are on our email distribution list, we'll send you an email to let you know when it's ready also. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Jake Locklear, our President and CEO, and he's going to kick us off with a brief operating review. All right, take it away, Jake.
This spring has been a spring like no other, and you have done extremely well in continuing to have APM perform at the level we expect and even improve. That is unprecedented, and that I am extremely proud to represent our business and to tell this story. I'm going to give you a few bits of information around how we're performing operationally. Going to turn it over to Bruce to talk a little bit about financially, then we'll start looking ahead. I do think it is very important that we pause at the end of a spring outage season and reflect on the things we have accomplished together. Everything with us starts with safety. You all know that. It is our keystone philosophy. And we have done a tremendous job of keeping our field teams safe this spring. Not only with relation to COVID and the cleanliness of our job sites, but the way we normally look at our business, from injuries, from potentially severe events, everything is down. Recordables year over year are down. First aids are significantly down. So it's not just that we're managing the injuries we have better, it is that we are actually doing a better job of keeping people safe. Equally with quality, our quality performance has been excellent this year. Again, the amount of rework we have done this spring has decreased, and so we're improving, and we have 0 severe events so far this year. So we did an entire spring outage season without a severe event from a quality perspective. So on the 2 key measurements for our business, safety and quality, we have taken significant steps in the right direction this spring. In addition, we see the culture continuing to take root in the organization. Our open reporting And the amount of observations, good catches, concern reports, stop moments that you have executed has increased year over year. And not only has the raw number increased, but we're seeing more of those observation reports come in with thoughtfulness, with preventative actions being identified. 92% of our observations so far have come in with a preventive action or a lesson learned attached to it. And then we've also executed over 1,200 hazard hunts so far this year. So great engagement with our culture. And then finally, when we think about lean, and it's a journey that the GE organization, our shareholders on, it's one we're equally on. I think we have seen the impact of lean on our job sites, and I think we have also seen the impact of lean and some cost savings. And we've already verified over $300,000 worth of cost savings just in the implementation of lean at a few of our sites. So overall, in our spring performance, we have done a stellar job. I am very, very proud. I cannot say how proud I am of the great work this team has done in the first half of the year. Not everything has been perfect. We have struggled with a couple of specific customers, and we have action plans in place to address that. With the travel restrictions, we haven't been able to do the type of audits and job site visits we would normally do. But we've also entertained some virtual job site visits and audits, and I'm happy to see the progress we've made in piloting that. But overall, as a business, we are performing very well. We are operating with excellence, and I am very proud of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Bruce, in part because the dogs are barking at something in the background. So I'm going to turn it over to Bruce, let Bruce talk about the financials, and then I'll have an opportunity to talk with you a little bit later.
Thank you, Jake. As Jake said, I'm going to give you a real quick summary of our year-to-date financial performance. So we'll jump right in. 2020 started strong and optimistic. We were benefited and had some momentum coming into the year by a little bit larger than normal backlog of unbilled costs from 2019, which is always helpful. It gives us a little head start towards our revenue goal for the year. And it's not unusual. We always have some level of backlog moving from month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year. But last year, it just so happened we had just a little bit more than normal. So again, that's a good thing. It gives us a little head start towards our goals. But in addition to that, we also executed hours in excess of target and prior year by about 36,000 hours over target, which was about 7%, and about 66,000 hours over prior year, which was about 12%. So we had some momentum coming into the year, and then we executed over and above the plan and the prior year. So that's all good. Margins related to that work were slightly unfavorable. 13% margin versus a plan of 13.5%. And that's just largely due to mix. And when we talk about mix, we think about like, how did we plan versus how we actually executed, how the volume actually executed versus how we planned. So gas volume was down a little bit, steam volume was relatively flat, boiler was up, especially service was flat. You also think about the fact that we literally have thousands of billing rates. You know, billing rates vary based on business, based on labor type, based on region that we work in, based on the schedule, based on the crew mix. So all these things impact how the actual profitability plays out versus plan. And it's really hard to plan all those granular different details. So we do know that there's going to be some mix changes as we go throughout the year. But the margins, again, down slightly, 0.5%. But due to mix, so not a big deal. SG&A costs, these are our overhead costs, our structural, functional, operational costs that it takes to run this business. All stable, no surprises, on target for the year. So all good from that standpoint. So at the end of the day, this rolls down to a bottom line of $131,000 over plan on the bottom line. That's $131,000 over the plan, which was a $7.2 million OM target on $102 million worth of revenue. And that was roughly about 1 million man hours executed versus a plan of about 960,000 man hours. So all good. We had a great first quarter. Second quarter, unfortunately, still shaping up to be a great quarter, but as you know, the COVID pandemic impacted the business pretty dramatically. Outages were moved, outages were delayed, canceled. Our personal lives were impacted as well. And the impact was severe enough that the shareholder and the business said that we need to recast our targets and reset our expectations. So for the second quarter, we originally were planning on about $138 million worth of revenue, or about $1.4 million worth of hours to execute. After we polled the regions and figured out what was moving around due to COVID, we determined that that number needed to drop by about 30%. So we dropped down our revenue expectation from 138 million down to 99 million, and our man hours from 1.4 million down to 1 million. The good thing about all this, kind of the silver lining in it, is that, one, we're expected to recover all this deferred or delayed revenue or hours. Most of it is a little bit of it's moving into 3Q. Most of it's going to be split largely between 4Q 2020 and 1Q 2021. So it's going to be a very busy fall. So be prepared for that. Another good thing is that we found we are an essential business, which allowed us to continue to operate to a certain extent and to continue to, keep everybody employed and busy. So that's another very good thing. And the other very good thing is that, we have a variable workforce, and through all this, it really, I think, showed the value of our business model of that variable workforce. Bulk of our operating expenses are variable. It allows us, to naturally, organically, automatically kind of manage our costs as the volume fluctuates. And it keeps cash flow in line with expenses, which is a very hot topic these days within the organization, and a very important metric. So how's 2Q shaping up? Again, we recast our revenue down to about $99 million, and the expectation from what I recently rolled up in some forecasting and some pacing is we're going to beat that by, I think roughly we're going to come in around 102 to 105 million. So we're going to beat that by a couple percent, which is good. Our margins are healthy. Our margins are on target. Our OBC and base cost stewardship is good. Now, when we think about OBC and base costs, we're thinking about our overhead, our structural costs, and that's still a pretty large bucket of costs that don't necessarily vary with work like our craft labor costs do. So we are looking at levers to pull and costs to remove from the business, or maybe not totally remove, but at least defer, delay the business as we, experience this temporary downturn. Some things, we are executing on currently is the training, the summer superintendent training is being canceled at this time. Any other kind of investments are being held on. Hiring freezes, you probably heard about. So things like that are levers we're trying to pull to kind of bring down our more relatively fixed structural costs to keep them in line with our volume. So we are expected again to meet our second quarter plan. We'll probably exceed it slightly by a couple 100,000, which is good. So that's 2 relatively strong quarters in a row. And just looking forward again, a lot of the volume's moving out and it's going to make third quarter and fourth quarter even busier than what we had planned. So be prepared for that. And if I could tell you to focus on one thing you could do to help the business, I would say focus on learning and understanding lean, what lean is. I know that there's trainings available. You could either probably get with myself, our lean leader, Lisette Lopez, or even Tom Herman's at the LBC. We can point you in the right direction to get some preliminary understanding of lean and lean concepts. And what this will do is it'll just teach you how to recognize and eliminate waste, minimize outage costs, and that'll ultimately keep us competitive, and we will ultimately win more outages as a result of that. So that's where we're at in a nutshell. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alex for the fall safety focus.
Thanks, Bruce. I wanted to start off by kind of echoing some of the discussion points that Jake had earlier about what an excellent job we've done as an APM team of reducing not only the injuries to our teammates, but additionally capturing unsafe situations before they present themselves as an injury. As Jake alluded to earlier, year over year, our improvement is about 30% from 2018 each year, which is, it's just awesome. We're sitting at 6 recordables for the year. This time last year, we were at 10. And I believe the previous year, we were almost at 20. So great improvements there. I appreciate all the members of the APM team for doing their part for us to kind of see that improvement and protect ourselves out in the field. That being said, as we move closer to the fall outage, the EHS team has been working with the operational leaders to take a look at some of the situations that have presented themselves during the spring outage and 2019 as well, to determine what our focus areas should be going into the fall outage. You'll see some communications in the fall outage around PSE, potentially severe events, the definitions of that, how we're going to start tracking that, the purpose behind it, so on and so forth. Eye protection has been a major issue for us year over year, taking a look at some of that stuff as well. Caught behind type incidents where we pinch fingers or are struck by a tool or something like that. And for the purpose of this conversation, our safe lifting and rigging practices. So as we exited kind of the spring outage season, the EHS team came together and started taking a review of what we have currently for safe lifting and rigging practices. Going into this discussion and reviewing these policies, I wanted to make sure that we were changing what needed to be changed and not going completely off the wall and trying to revamp things that are actually working. That being said, moving into the fall outage season, you'll see some small, more comprehensive type changes to our safe lifting and rigging practices, as opposed to a complete revamp of how we conduct ourselves on those types of jobs. What you'll see is, like I said, a more comprehensive approach that provides kind of some basic lifting and rigging safety precautions and allows some level of flexibility for our lifting and rigging subject matter experts in the field to make the right decisions on how to conduct a lift. Along with that will come a communication, including 7 posters. I think we've seen the safe lifting and rigging posters from the past. We've revamped those posters and made some adjustments. The 7 posters will be coming out as we move closer to the fall outage season, with a major communication within those posters about fall zone and the importance of limiting access to the lift zone and minimizing potential for impact to our personnel should an unexpected event occur while we're lifting. Additionally, so that's our main focus within APM. Additionally, another focus at kind of a more strategic level is the continued teamwork with our partnership with Field Corps and GE to work more closely together and try to align our policies as much as possible to minimize the confusion to the superintendents and the craft in the field of knowing what needs to be done when and what the expectations are on lifting and rigging. So that's the basic plan there as far as the communication is concerned and the safe lifting and rigging practices. As always, as I put out in every Monday email, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, feel free to reach out to me directly, your EHS manager or your service manager, because a lot of the things that we addressed in our focus for the fall were from the crafts people in the field and the superintendents as well. So I appreciate, just like Jake talked about earlier, I appreciate the involvement and kind of the proactive nature of reporting, but I also appreciate the involvement of the craft in kind of the guidance of where we need to be from an EHS perspective. So with that being said, I'll hand it off to Jake. He's going to cover some of the discussion points around life after COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Again, I cannot say enough how proud I am of the good work this team has done, particularly when it comes to keeping our folks in the field safe. Very proud. And this would be a time where I would virtually clap with you and say thank you very much for a job well done. We're learning a lot of new ways to do things in this new reality, and we're going to spend 5-6 minutes talking about that before we go into Q&A. Let me set the broader context for us as to how I see where culture and where multiple things are starting to converge together into the context of what environment our business is working in. With COVID, we have heard about potential second waves. We are seeing some spikes in certain states, including here in Texas, where we've reopened. Georgia is seeing a similar spike where we have some folks also. It was a note sent yesterday within GE that one commentator has referred to this more like a forest fire. And as long as you still have material that could burn, we're still going to see upticks and spikes periodically with COVID. All that being said is that I don't think COVID is going to be removed from our focus until we have a treatment and a vaccine, which means for at least the fall and into 20 and 21, the way we're working with COVID right now is likely the way we're going to continue to work. And we may even see moves towards a little bit more reopening and then pull back, and a little bit more reopening and pull back based off of local conditions. But this is our new reality for at least the fall and likely into 2021. But there are other impacts and dynamics beyond COVID that affect the environment in which we live and in which we work. There are market concerns. You have seen the volatility in the market go down, come back up. There is unemployment concerns, high unemployment that we haven't seen in quite some time. There are personal impacts to this. There are questions about supply and demand of various supply chain and resources. We have an election this fall, and I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but that in and of itself creates a unique environment for us to be working in. And then we have the cultural impacts that we have seen with the with some of the unrest, with the murder of George Floyd, with all those things coming together into a very unique environment this fall. This is beyond COVID. This is how we're going to operate and how we're going to live in an environment heading into the remainder of this year. For GE, if you've been following GE, you've seen the stock price. You've seen that GE was on a path to being positive this year with cash, which is one of the big key themes for Mr. Culp. That took a major impact with COVID, particularly with the aviation sector. But there's also impacts in the power sector. There's going to be some decreased demand for power with more people working at home and staying at home. You have seen the volatility in the oil and gas markets. and the political as well as supply chain issues associated with that volatility. We have seen the continued emergence of renewables that is also impacting how our people are working on certain units that are more secondary than primary for power generation. We've seen customers holding on to cash. Businesses in general, people are holding on to cash, which means for us not investing in new units and upgrades. So it is a dynamic environment. It is not just COVID, it is multifaceted, which means we as a business are going to have to be adaptable, and we are going to have to navigate our path with both knowns that we know, the unknowns that we don't know, and being very honest about what we don't know and trying to navigate that path as we go along with it. The unknown unknowns, if you will, and being humble and knowing that there are certain things we just don't know yet. We may not know we need to know it yet. And how do we operate in that environment? Give you a couple of things to consider as we operate. Again, as we go into the fall, this is going to be our reality. The way we operated in the spring, particularly when it came to COVID and the protocols we have in place, I expect we will be operating in that same environment this fall. And there are some key things I'd ask you to keep in mind as we execute with excellence heading into the fall. First and foremost, there is not enough thank yous we can say to each other. We're all doing a great job and we are all working very hard. We need to say thank you a lot. Second is maintaining daily focus and confidence. Focus on daily what we need to do, what your daily work is that you can do to deliver excellence, and be confident that you know what it is you need to be doing. Third, communicate. Communicate often and communicate through the chain. We have teams set up to handle a number of situations, COVID and other related. Communicate through your chain of command. That chain will get it to the right people to answer those questions. I think that worked well this spring, and I think will even be better this fall now that we have that underneath our belt. Leadership is critical at this time, and I'd ask you, particularly those who are leaders, whether you're leaders in the field or leaders in the corporate structure, how you lead yourself through this and how you lead your teams is going to go a long way into how successful we'll be. And then we also need to continue to recognize and celebrate the successes that we have. We've talked about the success we've had this spring. We're going to come back and close with a couple of specific customer stories around our success. That was the plan we had in the spring. That's how we communicated that to you, and I expect that to continue into the fall. Bruce talked about our financial performance in the first half of the year. We do basically have a freeze and volume shifting 3 to 6 months to the right. So we have taken some cost actions to mitigate that, but we are also looking very hard at how do we prepare ourselves so that when that late Q3, early Q4 rebound occurs, we are prepared, but also being good stewards of our cost right now while the volume has decreased. We have an action plan in place. We've prioritized what actions we will take. You're seeing some of that already with the T&L reductions, with some of the training reductions. And we know what levers we'll need to pull in certain situations, and we've prioritized those, keeping our people as the top priority. And the minimal impact we can have to you is what we want to do. Long term, I talked about the dynamic environment, the power demand shifts that are occurring, not just with COVID, but with a number of those dynamics. We're looking at where we play in this future market, how gas is going to play, how steam is going to play, what the impact of renewables will be, what's our play in the oil and gas sector as well. We're looking at all of those things while you have customers that are holding on to cash and not investing that at the moment. But we have a business model that wins, and we have a business model that can help customers reduce costs when times are tight, and that can quickly rebound when customers are ready to invest. That business model is a good business model, and we are looking at how we can optimize that business model to be prepared when our customers are ready to reinvest. Last thing I will say is I think we've learned from this spring that our people can do great work with minimal oversight. We did a lot of communicating and a lot of sharing of information, but when you had corporate structures that had one eye on the field and one eye on the future, whether it be the immediate future with COVID or whether it be the future with market dynamics, our field teams had to do a lot of stuff without people coming to site and without having people overseeing them. And you did wonderfully. You took ownership. That's something we're going to learn from. And I think that's something that we are going to see continue in our business. Superintendents taking ownership and being accountable for the deck like you have been gives us an opportunity to continue to look ahead to the future and optimize how we are set up. And I'm really excited to see how we continue that momentum into the fall as well. I know we're going to have some questions about COVID, so let me stop there. Let's open it up for the Q&A. We'll get into some more specifics around that. So Katie, let me turn it over to you guys to kick off the Q&A session.
Excellent. Thank you, Jake, and thank you, Chiefs, for a very good business update for the team. At this time, we're going to transition to our live Q&A portion. We did take some questions in advance of the event. We put out a digital form last week, and we had a couple of employees take advantage of that. I want to say a special thank you to those employees. Before we get into the live Q&A, we are going to do a quick random drawing and give away a prize for those who did submit their questions in advance. So Courtney, if you'll go ahead and share your screen, we'll do the live drawing with our audience. All right, let me grab that. All right, Courtney, we're ready when you are. Spin the wheel. Awesome. Seth Wilcox, congratulations, sir. So we'll be getting with you, specifically I'll be getting with you, I'll send you a message, but congratulations, you are a winner. So you'll be getting an APM Yeti cup and an APM thermal zip bag, all right? Very good. All right, so since Seth won, let's kick it off with Seth's question, how about it? And then as I am going through and reading the questions that came in from the digital form that we put out in advance, if you're joined over the live event, please feel free to go ahead and submit your questions at this time. And as they come into the queue, we will start to filter those through and I'll call them out and pass them off to a chief. All right, so starting with Seth's question, and Dan, I'm going to pass this one over to you, sir. Why do we still allow people to wrap packing in rags? It adds to the cut risk when cleaning, rewrapping, etc. When you can place it on shelves, much safer, and it eliminates a lot of risk.
Yeah, good question. I haven't done this myself a long time. That used to be kind of the standard practice, and I believe in the old days we wrapped them in rags because most of the crews weren't. A lot of the crews weren't wearing gloves. Protective gloves, cut-proof gloves. I think we did it originally as a method to help packing glands have very sharp edges on the seals, and we probably did it in a way of kind of half trying to attempt to minimize the risk to our employees. Now that we have extensive glove programs, my recommendation would be if it sounds like you have a best practice here, I know some of the general managers, Nick Brockman, Mark Campo, Adam Frank, have really taken on some of the best practice things and are trying to gather those up and circulate them back. So my recommendation would be if you have a better way to do it, please share it. Share it with service manager, service director, and let's get that in the pipeline. Because if we have a better, safer way, again, one thing that does happen when you have it wrapped in a rags is it tends to fall out of the rag. either hits the floor and damages a piece of equipment, or it hits you on a foot and damages you. So my recommendation is push that up, and let's see if we can't make a best practice out of it and publish it out to all of our folks. Good question. I hadn't thought about that.
Very good. Thank you, Dan. All right. While you're in the seat, sir, I've got another one here for you. I'm going to pass it off to you, and then maybe Colin would have some additional to add. Our next question reads, what is the biggest challenge moving forward from COVID-19? So Dan, I'm going to pass it to you first, and then Colin, if you have any follow-up, please feel free to do so.
Well, I think the biggest challenges for us moving forward with COVID-19, to Jake's point, I think we ended up at the end of the spring outage season, or during the spring outage season, we started to understand what was in front of us, and we started to develop a rhythm, a protocol of how we're going to handle it, what's going to happen. Probably what I worry about in the fall is almost COVID fatigue. To where it's, people become less afraid of it. It becomes more routine, and at the end of the day, we start to lose kind of our sense of protocols with it. I think we're well positioned to deal with it operationally. I do worry about, we're going to have places where we're going to have virtually no exposure anymore, certain states. We're going to have, to Jake's point, certain states that are going to have some peaks and valleys with it. We're going to be moving in and out of all of those environments. So our site teams, our crews, our superintendents are going to get very, very comfortable working in certain states that it's not a big deal. And then all of a sudden, we're going to go back to a Texas, to an Illinois, Florida, Georgia, where you may be walking into an environment where we really have to monitor, are we doing the cleanliness? Are we taking all the things we took into account in the spring? So to me, I don't know that fatigue is the right word. I just think we're going to be in and out of it on a fairly regular basis for the foreseeable future. And I just want to make sure, and I think the challenge is going to be, do we stay mindful? Do we continue to do the great things we did this fall? So, Colin, I don't know if you have better or more words of wisdom.
No, Dan, I would really just echo what you've said and what Jake has said. We're seeing this has a long-term impact. Jake's words, it's a long game here. So we need to keep up with the good habits that we've developed. We need to not get fatigued and regress. And I would just say this, I think from my perspective, and it's basically what you said already, Dan, is the biggest challenge is this is an ever evolving situation based on locations, and even down to customers. Some customers will require us to do certain things that other customers may not. And so keeping focused and keeping track with that. That's but I really do think you and Jake both said it very well. Katie, I'll pass it back to you for the next question.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Thank you both. All right, our next question I'm going to pass over to you, Bruce. And it reads, employees have made many changes to adapt to the current pandemic. What interdepartmental improvements have the ops teams seen to highlight wins for APM?
Yeah, so I can speak to that, mainly from a, functional, structural standpoint that, there's the COVID has lent itself to a lot of lean opportunity learnings and projects. We've been forced to move away from heavily manual, heavily paper-driven approval and audit processes, made to leverage technology more and various different electronic and digital solutions, all of which, save time and money. And I think an additional benefit is that it further prepares us, for future, events. We've always struggled a little bit with disaster recovery around hurricanes and that, living down here on the coast. So it's been an opportunity to further prepare us for those types of events, and it's forcing us to move in a direction we should have been moving a long time ago.
Very good. All right, our next question here, I'm going to pass over to you, Julie. Is there a plan to include all of an employee's experience statistics in airtime? Currently, only the recent history is shown.
Great, thank you, Katie. So great suggestion. I can tell you that today we do not have that feature in the queue. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't. And as what we'll do is I will be asking the team to reach back out to the submitter and ensure that we really capture all of the requirements for the ask, and then we'll move forward from there. So keep those suggestions coming in, and we'll be reaching back out to make sure we understand what the ask is there.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie. All right, so we do have one additional question that's been submitted. I will say we're having a little bit of a difficulty with the Microsoft Teams Q&A. So I'm actually going to just pivot, and I'm going to have you submit your questions via the Slido that we had set up prior to the event. We do have a couple of questions that have already come in via the Slido, so that's great. Some of you intuitively went back out there and started to submit. Let me pull that up on screen real quick, and you'll be able to see the QR code, as well as if you just go to slido.com and enter the event number that's on there, you'll be able to submit from there. So let me share my screen with you. All right. And you should be able to see the QR code here. So I'm going to leave that up for just a few seconds. Give everybody the opportunity. If you would like to either scan that QR code, if you have a mobile device, all you have to do is simply open up your camera app. You don't actually need to take a camera. You'll just place it right in your camera's view, and it will open the link. Alternatively, if you want to go to Slido, slido.com, and enter the event code there, number 54425, it will also bring you into the live event, and you'll be able to submit your questions very easily. All right, very good here. All right, so we do have one additional question already that's been submitted. Let me read that one aloud for us. All right, it reads, are there any plans to cross-train in renewable technology? Some of the Field Corps crews are doing this. So Dan, I'm going to pass this over to you first, sir.
Thanks, Katie. The answer is yes. I know some of our groups, in particular Specialty Services, has looked at battery farms, what the work scopes are, what if any maintenance, what is generally can be done on the future of battery storage. We are working mildly with the UBC, looking at solar farms, solar farm construction. Not a lot of maintenance on a solar farm, but certainly many acres of tube steel and panels to be kind of erected there. We looked at hydro relative to our partners in GE Canada. We are doing some limited partnerships with them. Right now, currently, we do a lot of piping and things to assist them in the hydro world. As far as the windmills themselves, we did a pretty deep dive on it, but it's been several years to that point. Do we need to look at that again? There's a certain amount of appeal in windmills. There's also a certain amount of safeguards against windmills. It's a lot of climbing. It's very tough work. Currently we don't really have a model to really go after in that field. But we are looking at it. I think that's part of what we need to do to keep pace with the various markets that we're in. So to a degree, yes, we're looking at it. Do we have immediate plans to plunge into any of them? The answer is probably no, but by 2021, we might be in a position to where we're going to look a little harder at those.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. All right, we've got a couple more questions coming in here through the chat. The first question, I'm also going to pass back to you, Dan. How are we doing so far this year on Boilermaker hours? And then Colin, if there's any update that you want to give as well, that's fine.
Well, I guess I can tee that off and probably defer it to either Jake or Colin. They've been much more, well, from an hour standpoint. You know, I mean, again, our Boilermaker hours, if you look and you split it into domestic versus what we do in Canada, I think we're tracking pretty well on Boilermaker hours in Canada. To a degree, both of those businesses have kind of had a reset where when we first took over APCom and API, they were more diverse businesses. They had a lot of other things pulling into them. When we really boiled it down to boiler, we kind of established a new set of numbers from an hour perspective. Canada, I think, is in decent shape. The Boilermaker hours in the US, we had specific targets that we had set for this year. We are not tracking to those targets. I don't believe it's due to a lack of effort on anybody from APM. I think we're pulling out a lot of plugs, and we're really looking at some different arenas within that Boilermaker segment that we can use to drive hours moving forward. But I think realistically, we're probably behind on those hours. So Jake or Colin, if you guys want to give a little more insight, that would be great.
Dan, I think you really said it well. We're working hard, but beyond what you said, I really don't know that there's much else to say on that point. I'll turn it over to Jake if he's got further commentary.
Dan summarized where we're at well. I think we have to, as an organization, with every one of our businesses, based off of the multiple dynamics we talked about, we have to look at what's the right strategy. And we're still trying to find what is that right strategy for Boilermaker volume, both in the US and Canada. We have put some effort in both territories. In the US with some funding to try and win some man hours, in Canada with a renewed focus with a couple of our service managers on some specific markets that we had lost some traction on. We got to continue to look at that strategy because it is extremely competitive and we're not winning like we want to. And we've got to look seriously at what is the right strategy for both those groups. So I think Dan summarized the current status well, and we need to look ahead as to what is the right strategy in this ever-changing world.
I would just say from a raw numbers perspective, you know, the U.S. is doing well. They're, even in the midst of a global pandemic, they're up about 40%. You know, again, it's short of the targets that we were hoping for, but it is up significantly over prior year. In Canada, it's the opposite. We're down probably close to 50%. And I think that's largely, again, to do with the pandemic.
Very good. Thank you all. All right, we do have another question submitted in the chat. Jake, I'm going to pass this one to you first. You may decide to pass it off to Bruce as well. Will we have an EOP this year?
So we are going to wait until we close the books on the second quarter to make a final decision here. In full transparency, we are looking at EOP for a certain segment of our population. EOP for those who just affect on payroll or will there be salary increases this year? We are looking at a particular segment of the organization to see whether or not we can fund salary increases for that group. It's primarily those who are not bonus eligible, and see if we can fund that. The rest of the organization, at this time, we are not planning to do an EOP, but we are going to look at the close of the second quarter, see how we ultimately come out, and then see what makes sense from either funding it in the summer or delaying it until 2021. So has not been fully decided yet. It is one of those levers we have looked at potentially pulling if we need to. And again, we are looking at it not just holistically for the entire organization, but we're looking at it in certain segments, and in particular segments between those who do get a bonus and those who do not get a bonus, because we do understand the impact that salary increases have on you and your families, and so we don't want to make that decision lightly. So I would expect within the next month we'll be able to give more specifics and have a decision on which way we're going to go with salary increases.
Thank you, Jake. All right, we do not have any additional questions in the online Q&A at this time. So I'm going to quickly just bring the QR code and the link back up for anybody that may want to scan it and put their questions in the chat. So I'll give everybody a minute here. Feel free to scan that code or enter that event number and we will get your question. All right, we've got one question in the chat here. All right, the next question, I'm going to pass this one to you, Jake, first. If you want to involve someone else, feel free. It says, do we know when the offices will reopen?
No. The short answer is no. We are starting to prepare to reopen, but given the expectations on how we're going to be set up when we reopen the campus and the offices, as one of my recent blog posts we talked about, there's got to be a mental shift and a transformation of how we think about offices before we come back, and I do not want to underestimate that. And then I had a conversation with somebody within GE today where GE had opened some offices, and given some of the spikes in some of the states, they're wondering if they need to pause on that for a number of factors, not just the spikes, but because a number of people weren't comfortable coming in. So the way I would describe it is we are now entering the area where we're going to be preparing to open, but we are not going to push it. And I want to make sure that when we do reopen, we do it right. And right to me is not just for COVID. Right to me is a different mentality when we walk into this campus, because there are some other activities that may potentially start to happen at the campus that make it more of an industrial feel. And I want our people's minds to be ready for that. And the last thing I'll say is, do not underestimate the behavior change that it takes to come back to the office. There are a number of things that should look and feel different when we come back to the office while we're still working through the COVID challenges and some of the expectations that Harris County is going to have, that the state of Texas is going to have for us, as well as for how we do it in other localities as well. So we are preparing to reopen, but we are not going to push it.
Very good. Thank you, Jake. All right, I think we've got time for one more question here. There's a few more that came in. I do want to honor time. We will find a way to follow up on all of the questions that get entered into the Slido, so don't worry. We'll figure out a format to follow up. But for the interest of the live event, I'm going to take one last question and then we'll close out here. So Jake, I'm going to pass this one back to you. It says, will the company start to evaluate COVID situations locally and, for example, in Canada, and ease travel restrictions, or do we expect the restrictions will stay in place across the board?
I do think there's an element where we will look at situations on a local basis and we'll make decisions that make sense for that locality, as long as we can do it safely, and as long as we can do it compliantly. And again, I do not want to underestimate what those two things entail, doing it safely and doing it compliantly in this new world and this new reality we have right now. So if there is a specific travel need that is business essential, or that will help you do your job better, raise it up through the chain of command that we talked about, communicate it, elevate it, we'll give it an honest look. And last thing I'll say about travel, it's also about infrastructure associated with travel. And our team had the fortunate opportunity to really investigate how you do travel with some of the challenges this spring. It's not just the, hop on a plane and get somewhere. It's do you have hotels that you trust that you can stay in? Can you rent a car? Can you do all those other things that will make travel what we came to expect and rely upon with travel is just going to be different. And so don't underestimate that. But if you do have a specific travel need or would help you do your job better, raise it up through the chain of command. Let's give it an honest look and see what makes sense.
Very good, Jake. With that, I think we're ready to close.
All right, so I wanted to share, celebrate a little bit with a couple of comments we've received just this past week from some customers. NRG was a customer that we struggled with last year, and as a demanding customer, and some comments that came back from one of their high-level leaders as to the overall GE performance for 2020 in the spring compared to 2019. Outage execution was great, both for planned outages as well as forced outages. And we did both planned outages, whether it be Parrish in the boiler space, which had its multiple challenges, but overall I think the team did very well there, or whether it was Arthur Kiel, where we sent people into New York City into the hotbed, and we were able to execute well in that environment. NRG said establishing pre-lift calls with sites was a good idea. So they even saw specific behaviors and specific tactics that were implemented that made a difference. And the one thing that they wanted to conclude that with is we cannot be complacent or convince ourselves that our work is done. We got some feedback from Dominion Millstone. I'll just share this with you. Hands down, the two biggest things that GE could do to bring more value to the site is lower costs and repeatability of personnel. And they go on to talk about just how good our crew was at Millstone. No safety events, which was always the key to success. We entered a new realm of difference with COVID-19. There was lots of coaching going on to help with the not normal circumstances. The GE and its affiliates, being APM, continuously use their expertise and knowledge, which is unparalleled. So two significant customers, NRG and Dominion, who felt the experience that we want to deliver. And then finally, As some of you may know this, we currently have a crew in Romania doing a nuclear outage. Mike Keel, Mark Campo, and that team did a tremendous job of helping us evaluate and getting a crew prepared to fly overseas to fulfill for a customer on an urgent outage need, a critical business need. That customer wanted our team so badly that they were willing to pay for us to charter a plane to put 60 people on that plane, 60 of our members, to fly across the Atlantic and do that outage. Yeah, that's when we're providing value. That's when we're winning, when a customer says, I want that team back so badly that I'm willing to make that investment. So as we close here, again, a couple of things to highlight. We are on the right path with our journey. We are seeing that our performance continues to improve. Our business model has advantages in this environment. Our culture is taking root. Very proud of that. We're going to continue on the journey and the path we've been on for the past couple of years. Cannot get complacent. Remember those comments from our customer NRG. We have to continue to look at the business and find ways that we transform in this environment. And we will use a lot of lean principles to help us in that transformation. Continue to take ownership and accountability. There are all these dynamics that are going on is going to force everybody to be more empowered and to take more ownership of their jobs and to be more accountable of their performance. And I think we saw some fruits of that in the spring, but we still have a ways to go with that. We're going to continue to push that in the fall. And then finally, how are we driving value? How are we driving value that GE and the customer sees? And I think those comments from both Dominion and NRG very much say it all. Are we getting people to the sites that know what they're doing, that give that customer an experience that is unparalleled and is delivering value for that customer? So as we head into the fall, be thinking about those things. And with that, Katie, want to thank everybody and for the great first half of the year and looking forward to the second half. So we'll turn it over to you, Katie.
All right. Well, thank you, Jake, and thank you, Chiefs. Excellent job presenting this afternoon, this morning, depending where you're joining from. Again, we did record the event. We are going to make this available on our social networks, so look for this link by Friday, and definitely follow us on our Outage Buzz social media. Stay in tune with everything going on across APM. Thank you all for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.